Hello, everyone, and welcome back for part two of Module 12 to talk about macros. And so in part one, I created this very simple user application to calculate the monthly payment on a car loan. And we identified that there were three inputs that are needed to know. I got a calculation for interest rate that's based on the logic of our business rule. And then I'm using a PMT function, a financial function, to find the output that we're after in the monthly payment. Again, a simple example with a few inputs, one processing step, and then a calculation of the output. And obviously, depending on the situation, you could have way more complicated sets of calculations and lots of inputs or changing variables, etc. But in chapter 12, I'm trying to illustrate the idea of data validation, cell protection, and in this video, we want to talk about the idea of macros. And so I'm going to unprotect this sheet because I last had it protected, and it's not uncommon when you're working in Module 12 to turn protection on, and then you have to change something, so you got to turn protection off. You can only edit the spreadsheet when protection is turned off, and so keep that in mind if you're doing revisions on projects. And so what I want to do is in chapter 12, they talk about the idea of a macro. And in order to create and use macros, I need to have a developer ribbon, which my computer already has because I've used it a number of different times in different situations. But most likely, you don't have this developer ribbon yet. And so you're going to need to go on a PC to File, Options, and when you get to options, a window will come up and it will have customize ribbon on that choice. And you have to scroll down on the right-hand side and you'll see a checkbox next to the term developer. And if it's not checked, you want to make sure that it is green with a white check mark. And when you click OK, it will then add this ribbon to your Excel program, and that ribbon will stay there unless you ever go in and turn it off. If you're on a Mac, it's a slightly different process. Off the top of my head, I don't have it memorized, but if you go up into the search bar and just type developer ribbon, it will give you a help suggestion about where to go, and or go to Google and Google that same term, and it will find the developer ribbon for you on a Mac. And once you have the developer ribbon, now I have this section on the left, which is all about macros. And in this file, if I were to click on the macros icon, there is a macro library, just like we had a scenario manager library. And in this file, there are no macros, so that library is empty. And so, if there were macros here, we could go in and look at them. We could go in and edit them or run them. But right now, the macro library is empty. But we're going to create a macro, and macros are written in Visual Basic programming language. And one way to create a macro is to write computer code. And that requires knowing Visual Basic. And I'm assuming none of you know Visual Basic for applications. Certainly not enough to just sit down and typing and writing out computer code. Even I would have a bit of a difficult time getting started with that. You'd have to refresh my memory on a number of different things. But in Excel, again, the goal is efficiency. The goal is making things easier. They have a tool in the developer ribbon, which is called Record Macro. And I make the analogy that the macro recorder is a lot like Google Translate. Again, you can not speak the language of a foreign country when you're traveling, and with Google Translate, you can speak in English, and it will then translate what you're saying into a foreign language that you could then play for somebody to communicate. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to help you ace your upper level foreign language classes, but it's pretty good, and it certainly you can survive on it. And that's kind of the idea in this introduction to macros, is that macro recorder, it's not going to be the perfect translation and the perfect way to do everything, but for a lot of basic things, it eases the fact that I don't have to learn a bunch of Visual Basic code. I can simply speak the language that I know, which is Excel. And when I say speak the language, I'm not going to actually talk to the computer, but it records my actions. And so I'm going to go to the developer ribbon, click on record macro. it will allow me to name that macro. So I'm going to call this the clear macro because I want to create a macro that's going to clear this form out for the next user. You don't have to enter a shortcut key. You don't have to enter in a description. Those are optional settings. And I'm going to click OK. And when I click OK, Macro Recorder is going to start. And the only way I know that is that this button now says stop recording. And so I can assume it's recording. And again, it's sometimes a little bit unexpected. It's not like there's some big red light that comes on so that you know you're on camera, etc. And the other part of recording macros that is unexpected often for students is that recording macros is not like recording video. If you pull out your iPhone and you start push record, everything that happens from the time you push record is recorded over time, whether there's speaking or acting or sports plays happening, whatever it is, you get a video. But I pushed record about 30 seconds ago, and since I pushed that button, Excel has recorded nothing. And that's because Excel is and VBA is an event-driven programming language. It is only recording events. It's not recording time. It's not recording voice. It is only recording actions. And an action in Excel is clicking on a cell, clicking on a button, right-clicking, choosing a menu item, typing text. Those are all actions. But as I have pushed the record button, I have yet to do any actions. And so now I'm going to do my first action. I'm going to put my cursor in cell C4. So I'll click into cell C4. And this is a clear macro. I want to clear out the form for the next user. So I'm going to hit the delete key to clear out cell C4. I'm going to hit cell C6, hit the delete key, go to cell C8, hit the delete key. I've now cleared out the three yellow input cells. And then I might say, well, let's put my cursor back in cell C4 just to be user friendly so that when somebody starts, their cursor is at the top cell rather than at the bottom. Sometimes it's just those minor things that make life a little nicer for a user. And I'm going to go up and push stop recording. And it's important to push stop recording because, again, if I keep recording, well, later on when I play this back, it's going to play back all those actions. And so I don't want it to record things that I don't want to include in the playback. And the other thing is, if I record too much, I forget to push the stop button and I keep on going, I don't really have a good way to edit it at this point. Our goal is not to become proficient editors of Visual Basic either. I will mention when you push stop recording, you do get a window that pops up about saving the script. For our purposes, we do not need an Office script, so I'm going to close that out. Just click on the X button. And the macro that we recorded is actually stored in the macro library. So if I click into that button, it'll show me the list. I'm not going to run it right now, but I'm going to go and click edit. And when I click edit, I'm going to be able to see the Visual Basic code that I recorded. And the nice thing about Visual Basic is you can oftentimes read it. If I had given this to you first and it said range C4.select, selection.clear contents, and on and on and on, you might say, I don't know how to write this from scratch, but I understand, it looks like they're selecting a cell C4, and then it's telling it to clear the contents of C4, and then it's selecting C6, and it's clearing the contents of C6, and, it's fairly intuitive and an English reader could understand what it is. But again, I couldn't write that and have the parentheses in the right spot and the period, dot select, dot clear contents. I might say, well, it should be dot delete instead of dot clear contents. Well, that's the language and the syntax of Visual Basic. And so we won't do much in terms of editing or writing in the Visual Basic editor, but we can certainly pull it up and see it. We can close out the Visual Basic editor and get back to our spreadsheet. And so now if I put in a customer, so let's say we have a used car customer who wants to buy a $44,000 used car and they want to pay over, say, 36 months. I'm going to get a value that's quite big, 1,378. And if I wanted to run this macro, I could go to the macro button assuming I had the developer ribbon, which not all users are going to have. And then I go to click on the run button when I click on the clear macro. And you will see it very quickly, faster than I did it in real time. It will clear out those three yellow cells and put the cursor back in cell C4. Because again, it just executes those actions with no time in between. If I had sat there and clicked on one and clear contents, then waited 5 minutes to do the next one, when I run the macro, that 5 minute time is not part of the playback. It's just what is the series of actions one after the other. And so going to the developer tab, finding the macro button, finding the right macro in the list, that is asking a lot of the user. And so what we do in chapter 12 is we say, well, on this same developer ribbon, there is a toolbox that says insert, and there are some form controls that are pre-built. And so I'm going to choose the upper left item of form controls. This is one of the few that they talk about in chapter 12. And I'm going to left click on it. And then it's going to turn my cursor into a plus sign, which I can drag and draw. And I'm going to draw a nice rectangle. It's going to say, well, in that rectangle that you just created, what macro do you want to connect to it? I'm going to choose the clear macro, click OK. And I'm now going to get a button. It says button 4. That's just text, so I could go in and edit that. But now that rectangle, when I put my cursor over it, it looks like a hyperlink, but it's actually a button that's going to execute a macro. And so now if I go in and I say, okay, we've got a used car, this time it's going to be 22,000 for 60 months. That gives me my car payment calculation. When I push the clear button or the clear form button, again, it executes very quickly. The three cells become empty, and now I have a blank form again for the next user. And so we're primarily going to do pretty simple macros, but in theory, you could do anything your mind could think of as long as you know the Excel techniques and or the Visual Basic. And so, again, in our class, we only have so much time, so much, to cover. But in theory, if you wanted to design an application, a button that did something, in a particular way, or it did something that accomplished a task, etc., well, you could pre-program those buttons to do and carry out those specific tasks. And you know, oftentimes in the workplace, they don't come from just somebody dreaming up an idea. Oftentimes it's working with a business customer or a client to say, well, I would like, the spreadsheet to do this. And wouldn't it be nice if we just had a button that you could push and, this would happen. But clear buttons are very common. Print buttons are very common. Sometimes, copying and pasting data from one location to another in a spreadsheet is common. You can build macros to take data that you have in Excel and import it into other programs. Again, it's really what your mind can envision. Can you match it up with somebody that knows the coding to make it happen? When we create a macro in a file, we do need to do one thing that is different from all the other chapters, is that when I save this file, so if I go File, Save As, I'm going to need to save it as a macro-enabled workbook, a .xlsm extension. And when I do that and click Save, now it will save that file and it will allow macros to be there. If you miss this is important. If you don't save it as a .xlsm file, if you save it as a regular Excel file, any of your macros are going to be deleted because a regular Excel file .xlsx isn't allowed to have macros in it. And macros, as I said, can be used for all kinds of things. Unfortunately, just like any technology, it can be used for good and for evil. And so there are people who in the past have written macro viruses or macros that do destructive things to your computer or to files. And so when you open up that file, so I'm going to close this file real quickly and jump to my cluttered desktop here. But I've got this module 12 file here. It's an Excel macro file. When I open it, don't be surprised when you've made it into an XLSM file. it's going to open up. Excel's going to think about it. I'm running a little bit low on memory, but it's going to get there. And when it opens up, it's going to have a security warning. It says macros have been disabled. And that is the default setting. Almost all of your computers are going to do that, where it's going to say, this file has a macro. I've disabled it. But if I want to let the macros run, I need to click on enable content. And again, that's just a safety feature because in the event-driven world, opening a file is an event. And so if it didn't have that safety check to say, well, do you want these macros to run? You could open a file. Opening the file would trigger a macro to do something perhaps dangerous, like install a virus or do something to your computer, and you would have no way to stop it. And so at least in this way, it will warn you. And if it's a file that you're not familiar with, somebody emailed it to you that you don't even know, I would be very, very suspicious and not click on enable content. If it's your homework assignment that you created, obviously it's intended to have macros in it. That's okay. But it's just a protection that Microsoft has gotten very protective about because again, if you just open a file and it runs a macro virus, then there's nothing to stop that or protect it. And so they're trying to do as best they can to identify macros and let you make the choice about whether you want them to be enabled or not. And so with that, that is a quick overview of simple macros. Again, if you have questions as you do that, SAM project and some other assignments that I'll be posting as we get ready for our last couple of assignments, let me know. Otherwise, have a great week and we will talk to you soon.